Enlightened Leader, the place where we talk about the future of leadership today. This is your host, Paul Marks. Now, business is all about the bottom line. It's all about making a profit, right? Or at least that's what most people think. However, our guest today says otherwise. This episode is about leadership and the rise of compassionate capitalism. Now, to help us to navigate this topic, we have Paul Hargreaves. He's the CEO of Cotswold, Fayre and Flourish. And he's also the author of The Forces for Good and The Fourth Bottom Line. Paul also helped us a lot with and contributed to the Enlightened Leader research as well. So welcome, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Paul.
Yes. It's always nice to have a good chat. So, Paul, you can tell from my introduction, today I'd like to talk about compassionate capitalism and actually essentially what it is and how it maybe differs from capitalism that we've known for the last 50 years.
Yeah, so the question to answer here really is what's right about capitalism and what's wrong with it, really, isn't it? And yeah, absolutely, businesses must make a profit. They don't continue to exist otherwise. But when putting a profit is the only aim of a business and the only reason for existing, which it is actually, by law, businesses in many countries legally the only thing they exist for is making a profit. And it's illegal in some states of the USA and some countries for businesses to exist for any other reason. And when that's taken to extreme, it means that abuse takes place, if you like, abuse of people, abuse of the planet, which is one reason we're in the mess that we're in now. And everything goes out of balance. And really, over the period from the Industrial Revolution onwards, which actually one of my ancestors was partly responsible for starting, because there were three inventions that automated the weaving process up in Lancashire, and a guy called James Hargreaves invented something called the spinning jenny, which was one of three things that helped the weaving process automate. I do feel a sense of responsibility here to sort out some of the wrongs that have happened. And what has happened over those 250 years or so is commoditization. So we've commoditized people. We've set, the people, well, the Victorian workhouses were a good example of that. But we've used people and sucked out all the resources out of people. We even use the term human resources in our companies, which I think is completely wrong because they're not resources; they're people. We've again with the planet, we've taken out. We've taken and not given back in terms of the planet and resources and stuff like that. And when that is taken to extreme, which it really has done for the last 50 years, we end up in this state of increasing inequality and the current climate emergency that we're in now. So I think it's important for businesses to hold those three things in balance: people, planet, and profit. Where you put profit first, you end up in trouble. If you put planet and people first, actually, and I can, from my own experience, prove this over the last few years, you actually end up making more profit anyway. So it's a psychological shift, if you like. If you're pretending to put people and planet first, really just because you want to make more profit, it probably won't work. It's about a complete shift in the culture of the business, and that's what we've done, and that's what I'm encouraging many other businesses to do.
Yeah, because Paul, you know what you just said before, going back, where you were talking about where businesses are essentially driven by profit, because legally, in many places around the world, they have to make a profit in order to be, to be up and operating. And so it, like you said, everything comes second to that, whether it's the people, the planet, or anything else. And now today you see a lot of organizations trying their best to do something for the planet or the local community. And I think for many years it was what called corporate social responsibility. But for me, I never really sort of bought into it really. I mean, I saw a lot of energy companies doing this kind of stuff, and my personal thoughts and feelings around that was, well, they're only doing that because they're destroying, and polluting the environment, and they're trying to sort of save their face on this.
Yeah.
But like you said, it requires a kind of a bit of a paradigm shift, really, doesn't it? I mean, because I still think a lot of organizations are still stuck in that sort of frame, if you like, where, well, we've got to make a profit, so let's just try and, make it out like we're helping people in the planet. I mean, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that, well, at the risk of being slightly controversial here, there is an element of spirituality here as well, and then the way our Western mindset works. I've spent a bit of time in India and places like that, and they intuitively they are more generous people. There's a Hindu kind of abundance philosophy, and I think in the West we're holding on. If I can say that, we have a fear of being without, and in many for many people that is genuine. They've had a tough upbringing and maybe have been without, and so when they go on to run a business, they're holding on too much and not being generous. Generosity is one of my favourite words currently, and I think business leaders who are generous of spirit and generous to their employees, it's about giving away. And most religions in the world, wherever you are, all have this kind of principle of what you sow is what you reap, and give and it'll be given back to you, that kind of stuff. And I think in business, if we could learn, or we could be free enough in our minds to be generous, to give away, we would actually get a lot back as well. But we don't seem to be able to do it in our slightly ungenerous Western frame of mind, I think.
I think that we're still stuck in that mindset of that rat race where, and especially now, I think it's tough because, with all the disruption that's happening, and of course what the pandemic's done, it's sort of escalated a lot of that. And businesses are just sort of focusing on, trying to make their businesses work. But I know that you've managed to do it. I mean, and something I wanted to talk to you about today was B Corp or B certified corporations, what that means. And maybe you could share a bit of your story behind, how you're operating your company, how it fits into your philosophy, and maybe some advice on, what other organizations or at least what leaders could consider, Paul.
Yeah, so I mean, my background is I was in the charity sector before I went into business. So I did go into the business world in 1999, wanting to use the business to make the world a better place. I'd kind of probably been rather frustrated in some of my charitable endeavours. It was always feeling like 2 steps forward and 3 back in terms of things moving on. And absolutely, charity, really all they're doing is repairing the mess that's been created by either business or government. So coming out of that and into the business world, we actually, of our first 5 employees, we had 1 ex-drug addict, 1 ex-alcoholic, and 1 guy just come out of prison. So probably a little too ambitious in hindsight. 60% is too high, let me tell you, for anyone listening. But there are businesses here, successful businesses in the UK that employ 10% of prisoners, for example, and get tremendous loyalty and do very well because of that. But 60% is probably a little high. So I went into business trying to use it as a force for good, if you like, and started with a business partner. Unfortunately, he left after a couple of years, and I was left holding the baby, and to be honest, fell away a bit from the original purpose of the company. And, all the pressures of startups, running out of money, not having enough to pay the wages at the end of the month. I'm sure lots of people have been there. But after around 10 years, I think it was exactly 10 years later, I went to Kenya on a trip. We were at that point we were making some profit. We wanted to give something back. I don't like that phrase actually, because that implies that you've taken something in the first place. So anyway, well, let's use it. Give something back. And I was absolutely, blown away by the poverty really in this particular part of Kenya that we went to. Came back into the business and wanted to do something about it as a business. And someone in the company said, "Well, I'll tell you what, let's do a charity ball." She worked part-time and she said, "Look, I'll give the other half of my time to organising this ball," which she did. And some of this is from hindsight, really, looking back, but there was, because we were then not just running a business, we're actually looking to give something outside ourselves. It added a new energy into the company, a new kind of dynamic, if you like. And I think for us, that was the turning point. And it was probably 3 or 4 years later, I first heard about B Corp through another CEO in the UK. As I found out more about it, I realised that here were a group of people who believed exactly the same as me about business. They were, running successful businesses, but they were also impacting the community, the planet. People enjoyed working for them. And it was exactly my philosophy of business. And we became a B Corp in 2015, one of the first kind of group of companies in the UK. And for us, it has been a fantastic framework to move on and to profoundly impact the culture of our business. So what is a B Corp? Well, first of all, you change your articles. So what I was saying earlier about legally companies existing just for profit, well, you change the law part of the business. In the UK, it's called the Articles of Association. To write into those, we exist for the benefit of all stakeholders, not just the shareholders, but people that work there, the local community, the planet, people in the supply chain, etc., etc. That's number one. Number two, you have to go through a rigorous certification process. It's now every 3 years, and get above a certain score. And the areas that it looks at is governance, community, workers, the environment, and customers. And it's not easy to get over the line. And the other interesting thing is the line actually goes up every year. So you have to continue to be getting better in order to stay as a B Corp. And I'm pleased to say our score has improved significantly over the last 8 years.
So essentially, Paul, sorry, just to stop you there. So what you're saying is that when you set the company up, you're actually held accountable to that criteria that you mentioned, the people, the community, the environment, and it's sort of done on a yearly point system. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, you're reassessed every 3 years.
Okay, 3 years.
But yes, it is on a point system. So you don't have to, obviously, current interviewing in question, don't have to be perfect. But you have to get above a certain line. So you can be, fantastic in the way that you treat your workers, maybe not quite so good on the environment, and still get over the line. But the great thing about it is that you see, as you're doing the assessment, you see some of the things you could be doing in the future, and that kind of drives the change, if you like. So we actually set up change groups in the company. So for each of those areas, we had a group looking at how we could get better. And the only rule about the groups was no one on the leadership team could be in them. So the groups looked at change, what we could change, came up with ideas, and generally the board said, yeah, sounds great, let's do it. For us, was probably the best thing I ever did in this area, because it got the kind of change in at the grassroots. So everyone in the company pretty much was involved in these groups. We were quite a lot smaller back then. So, and that it took, I would say, it probably took 2 years for the culture of that to spread throughout, for everyone to kind of get it. It's one reason I wrote Forces for Good, actually, because this idea can be a bit out of reach of some people. I wanted to encourage normal businesses like we are, like builders, cleaners, etc. You too can be a business that makes a positive difference in the world.
That's really interesting, because it's the hard part, right? Is that, for most businesses, and this is me speaking personally as well as an entrepreneur, like to make money has always been the driving factor, just to keep the company alive. And I really like the idea of the whole B Corp. I really do, and I think it is time. I love the idea of being more compassionate and helping and supporting the community and people and environment. However, it seems like when you're doing it, it's quite an extra load, if you like, to put on top of your shoulders when you're building a business, just looking at it from an outside perspective. So how do you sort of manage that? I would call it maybe extra responsibility, or maybe a better word is commitment rather than responsibility.
Yeah, well, yes, I get what you're saying. It might feel like that from the outside. From the inside, it doesn't really feel like that, because people go above and beyond, and they're really pleased to be part of a company that's doing this stuff. Job satisfaction, going home at the end of the day, not just to think that you've earned enough to pay your mortgage and actually probably contributed to a board of directors earning significantly more than you. That has never really been top of the list for people's fulfillment reasons for coming to work. In fact, most surveys, it's down about 7th or 8th, actually, in terms of why do you come to work. So I think being part of a company that they know that by being there, they are, in a very small way in some cases, making a positive difference to the world, I think does profoundly change people's philosophy on life. So, yeah, I can see how it looks from the outside like it's a load of extra stuff to do and putting pressure on people, but it doesn't feel like that on the inside at all.
So in actual fact, that because there's a different mindset, or maybe let's say a different culture that's created, people come to work with more enthusiasm. So you tend to get more, like you said, more out of people. They're more sort of committed themselves, if you are as an organisation, and they probably feel like they're serving a higher purpose than, like you said, than just shareholders.
Yeah, and if people are coming to work, they're fulfilled, they're happy, they're going to do better work, and the company's going to be more successful, isn't it? We do an annual, in fact, the deadline's today for this year's, actually. We do an annual employee survey. And one question I've always included in that is a very simple one. Do you enjoy coming to work? Yes or no? The worst score we've ever had on that is actually 94%, which apparently is quite good from comparing to other people. So, yeah, there's a high level of job satisfaction. Now, don't get me wrong. It helps if you are financially successful. It's a lot easier now for us to do stuff than it was in the past, just because we've got a good financial base and we can spend money. We've just offset all our plastic in our supply chain, which does cost money. And many years ago, maybe we couldn't have done that. So, absolutely. But it's back to the generosity thing. As you give away, actually get back, and more people want to deal with us now because we're doing that, because we're carbon neutral. We are a better company to deal with. We're attracting more business. And it's a positive feedback circle, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Like you said, I think, and I totally get that, where you're coming from now. Not only do you attract more business, but obviously you're going to attract more talent. And I think, show my age here a little bit, but I definitely think the younger generation are much more motivated today to work for an organisation that does something for a higher purpose, or for the environment or the community, rather than just working for a paycheck. I definitely think there's there's lots of research out there that would back that
Yeah,
up.
well, yes, and again, this year we've actually opened a totally new part of the business, a food hall and restaurant. So we were recruiting early this year, and in the UK at the moment, it's really, really difficult to get people in the hospitality sector. But we've ended up with an absolutely fantastic bunch of people. And the reason is because they want to work for a company like us that's making a
Yeah,
positive difference.
yeah. They're
So,
looking
yeah,
for you.
absolutely. And these things are going to become more and more true as time goes on. I think already there's over 50% Gen X and Gen Y in the workplace. So it's only going to become more true as time goes on. And companies that aren't doing this stuff just won't attract the decent talent coming into the work pool.
So, I mean, as you've been doing this for a few years now, Paul. You've led the company. A lot of the listeners that will be, tuning into this will want to know maybe where to start, or for even, what do they need to change? What do they need to do? And I think people recognize this isn't something that happens overnight, but maybe there are some steps that you can take to get things moving in the right direction. I guess that's what I'm asking. What sort of advice or insights could you share?
Well, the very simple one. There is something called the B Impact Assessment, which is you can go onto the B Corp website and go through the questions and just see where you're at as a company. It'll take probably 2 to 3 hours to do that, and you'll get a feel for where you're at in terms of this stuff. The actual process of certifying is far more complicated because you've then got to prove everything that you just said. But that would definitely be a good start.
And do you get like a report with that at the end of doing this assessment? Is there some sort of feedback that you get?
It'll give you it'll give you a score, and you'll see in the different areas where you're scoring highly and where you're not. And if you end up below the kind of 80-point line, it would become clear to you where you need to improve and maybe what you could do in the next year and before you have another go. I mean, talking about B Corp, we don't have a exclusivity on good business, but it is the only scheme I know that actually scores businesses on how good they are for the world. There's lots of other good companies that aren't B Corps, but as a starting point, I can only say from our own experience, it's been really helpful in kind of giving us eyes to see where we can become better as a company, and also interacting with other companies that are of the same mindset. Most good ideas are nicked from other people anyway, aren't they? So we've certainly nicked ideas from other companies, and I'm sure they've nicked from us as well. But over the years, I've been in business for 22 years now, and most businesses don't talk to each other enough. We could save ourselves so much time and energy just by interacting with other people and not reinventing the wheel. And that's true within the B Corp community or the better business or the conscious capitalism movement. Talk to other people, learn from them, and they'll learn from you.
And that's something that they actually encourage, is it, during the sort of process of becoming B Corp certified?
Yes, there are events, B socials they call them, where people can just turn up and network and find out a bit more from other businesses that are already certified. So yes, well, obviously they've been virtual for the last year, but hopefully they'll come back to being real life events. In fact, we're actually hosting one in a couple of weeks in the UK. So yeah,
great. So just reflecting back on what you've talked about. So it sounds like that a compassionate form of capitalism is out there. And like you said, obviously there are a lot of great businesses and organizations doing good things. But B Corp is one way of, I guess, creating a framework for organizations to be able to take this route, right? That's really what it's about.
Yes, and I think there's been a big shift in during the COVID times. A question I used to get asked on podcasts quite a lot is, how has being a B Corp benefited your business? And what they really mean is, how has it helped you grow your profit and turnover?
Yeah.
My answer was normally, that's the wrong question, but not the reason I did it. It's because it's the right thing to do. But and the answer was no for most of our time since 2015. But definitely in the last 18 months to 2 years, it has started making a difference in terms of us attracting new business, existing customers spending more with us. So I think finally it is starting to make a difference. And businesses that aren't heading this way, consumers won't be buying from them. This is the thing. Consumers are way ahead on this stuff than many businesses, and they will vote with their feet and spend the money elsewhere if they don't think the pound or the dollar they're spending is making a positive difference to the world. So it's essential, really, to move in this direction if you're going to grow and prosper as a company.
Yeah, I sort of attribute a lot of that to the younger generations as well. I see, a lot of younger people being more, I guess, choosy about where they decide to purchase things or buy products. And I think that, again, because it's evident, especially in the last couple of weeks, what we've seen going on with the environment and the climate issues, staring us right in the face. Really, it's really scary seeing, what's happening in front of our eyes. And, all right, I don't know how much could be changed or reversed, but it really does take for businesses to really rethink about how they run their organizations and to really consider this.
Yes, I'm campaigning at the moment. I've got a meeting with an MP in a couple of weeks there's a private members bill coming to the Parliament in the UK called the Better Business Act, which will legislate really some of the B Corp stuff, in that businesses, not being allowed by law to put profit above the planet or people. So, but changing the law, it won't change the world, but it will be another step in the right direction if this comes into UK law.
I'll be looking out for that. And Paul, just before we wrap up today, tell us a little bit about the books, because I know you've written 2 books, and I think for anybody that's interested in, or any leaders that are interested in going down this route, like I said, I think they might also be interested in your book. So, give us a bit of an overview of you've written 2, actually, isn't it, in the last couple of years?
So Forces for Good really was, as I mentioned earlier, it was written to kind of demystify being what a good company is about. There's a bit of our own story in there, and then lots of examples from other companies that are good companies and making a positive impact in the world. So it's really based around the triple bottom line: people, planet, and actually, if you focus on doing good for those 2, the profits will follow. But as I was writing that, and there was a 4th section in there on personal change, really, because it was during the process of writing that, I think, well, we can't, as leaders, we can't do this without some level of change ourselves, becoming more passionate, having a sense of interdependence with the world. And I've called that the 4th bottom line, which is really about personal change and compassion. So the second book is going more into that, and it's 50 characteristics of what a good leader looks like. So there are chapters on generosity, empathy, compassion, hospitality, curiosity, playfulness. The idea is it's only 2 or 3 pages to read each day, and then some action points to put into practice that day, to be more compassionate, to be more empathetic, to be more playful in that day. So 50-day book, and if you finish it, you may well be a different kind of leader than you were at the beginning.
Well, that's great. And again, I think that the book probably is a good way for people to at least recognize some of those quality and traits that are required in order to be able to lead an organization in the way that we've been talking about.
Yeah, because the idea we have in our heads about leadership generally is completely wrong. We think of, big people standing on stages, looking great, having big cars, flying in private jets. Well, to be honest, a lot of that stuff is complete nonsense. If you look at the people who've really changed the world over the last centuries, they're not like that. They're basically people who show love and actually serve other people rather than lording it over them. So I think we need a better type of leader emerging if we're going to move forward.
I often think, and again, I think through no fault of, people thinking this way, but very often they connect leadership with the idea of authority.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's so far from the truth, right? It's all right, you can get people to do things if you force them to do it. But, if you get people to work with you, or you even empower people to do something, like you said, with purpose and with passion, it's you get a different person, you get a different outcome, you get a different organization. Yeah.
Yes, rather than taking power away from people, you're giving them power. That's what good leadership is. Yeah.
Well, look, Paul, it's been fantastic having a conversation with you today, and it's been really good to actually understand a little bit more about, B Corps and what it all means, and more importantly, for any organizations or any leaders out there that like to get to learn a bit more about it. So I think, it's been very enlightening. It has been very enlightening for me. So thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Enjoyed it.